Hell you too, Mr. Mags here. Today, I will be asking the question, what if every Pokemon region had a flying gym leader? Now, the flying typing is one of the most abundant typings across all of Pokemon. However, because of that, I find it kind of odd that there aren't more flying specialists. There are a lot of regions that have a ton of very notable, very strong, very iconic even flying types, and there's not a flying specialist to really spotlight those. So today I thought I would create new flying type gym leaders for every single Pokemon region. Starting with a criteria for how I develop these teams. First, the gym leader team and position will be chosen based on the flying types native to the region. So first off, this is specifically saying that I will be focusing on the flying types that are native to the region. So I won't be pulling a Faulkner where for some reason they gave him a Pidgey and a Pidgeotto despite being from Johto, where those are Kanto Pokemon. I'll be trying my hardest to give all of these as many Pokemon from their given region as possible. And also, um, in general, I'm going to be singling in on one specific position of gym leader 1 through 8 and saying, given the flying types that are native to the region, here's the gym that I think fits this type of best. I can give more gyms in any given region, but I'll if I do give more than one gym to a region, I'll say which gym I personally think is the best. That's just to kind of allow myself to be a little more creative if I think there are, different flying types that could fit as aces on at multiple points throughout the game. Next up, I'll be using the version of the region with the most options. Now, thankfully, this won't really matter nearly as much as it did in previous videos since the flying type is so abundant. Um, there was only one instance where I did need to bring in it was the Platinum Pokedex in order to really build the best gym, but um, and all of the others, since there are just so many flying types, I had a lot to work with. Next up, I will not be reusing aces of any canon flying type gym leaders or Elite Four members in the region unless necessary. This is essentially just to, again, just allow myself to be a little more creative and not just, not just essentially make these gyms the same as other characters that already exist. Um, but along with that, all Pokemon from all other major trainers are fair game. So, for example, in Johto, like I said, this won't be a problem, but I will not be using Pidgeotto for Faulkner. You shouldn't have done that in the first place anyway, but regardless, Pidgeotto will not be used on Faulkner's team. But Will's ace of Xatu and Koga's ace of Crobat, those will be used. So, or those, potentially could be used. And lastly, the gym leader's overall strength will be based on the canon gym leaders of the region in question, if not a little stronger. So just the average base stat total of the position that I pick in any given region, I'll try to base that similarly, if not slightly stronger than the ones that are already there. Um, and for instances where I felt like the gym leaders were woefully underpowered, like in Unova and Callos, where they capped at only 3 Pokemon per gym, I'll definitely be upping the amount of Pokemon, but I kind of go by that by a case by case basis. So starting off with Kanto. Now this is actually one of the ones where I did create multiple teams. My my general rule for all of these videos is a if I make a team that is the eighth gym leader, I force myself to also make at least one that's a previous gym as well, just to kind of get away from the idea of, oh, here are the 4 or 5 best flying types. That's your eighth gym. You can work backwards. I think that's a little boring. I was essentially wanted to make choices with who I feel the perfect ace per position is. So I actually made 3 different teams for this one. First being the first gym in Kanto. I think Spearow and Farfetch'd would make a pretty interesting first gym. By that point in the game, the only Pokemon that would be good into flying would be the 1% or at least low percent encounter rate Pikachu in Viridian Forest. Um, there are a decent number of bug and even a couple of grass types you can get up to that point that would kind of struggle against this. So I could honestly kind of see this team being potentially kind of challenging that early on. Um, so yeah, and Farfetch specifically is one of those Pokemon that if this were any later in the region, Farfetch would not be good as a ace. But for the first gym, its attack and speed and its overall bulk, I think would be decent enough to work as the ace of a first gym. Plus, I really like it when gym leaders use Pokemon that are completely unique to them up to that point. Obviously, Spearow, you'll probably see a lot of Spearow up to that point. At least one junior trainer in the gym will have one, but Farfetch, it's a Pokemon that you wouldn't even ever see throughout the rest of the game unless it's on a random trainer or you do that trade in Vermilion, because otherwise is not found in the wild, at least in Red and Blue. So I really like the idea of you seeing this Pokemon that potentially you'll never see again throughout the rest of your playthrough in the first gym. So I really dig that. I personally actually like this sixth gym idea a little better. I kind of created this team specifically to represent the fact that in Generation 1, the original idea for the flying type was to be the bird type. So I wanted all of these. I wanted this mid-game team to be all normal flying bird Pokemon. So it's a sixth gym. He has a Fearow, a Farfetch'd, a Pidgeot, and a Dodrio. I just feel like Dodrio gives very strong ace energy here. I think Pidgeot might technically have higher base stat total, but Dodrio, I feel, is better in the stats that matter for an ace. It has way higher speed and way higher attack. So I just feel like that just fits better as an ace. So yeah, I really dig this as a kind of mid-game team. I could easily see this as a fifth or sixth gym. Um, so yeah, I could have thrown on, Golbat or Scyther to kind of mix up the typings, but I wanted this to represent the bird aspect of how Gen 1 originally wanted the flying types to go. That's part of the reason why I did create this eighth gym, where I created a team that had five Pokemon that all have unique typings: Dodrio, Golbat, Scyther, Aerodactyl, and Gyarados. Now, I could easily hear an argument that this team might be a little too strong for a gym leader, even the eighth gym. I do tend to like to have some kind of differentiation between the strength of a gym leader compared to an Elite Four member. I could easily see this working as an Elite Four level team. Maybe Golbat kind of anchors it just a little bit in order to kind of keep it to that gym leader tier, but obviously Agatha uses Golbat uh in the Kanto Elite Four, so it's not a perfect system, but the reason why I like this as an eighth gym is I feel this team, just the vibe of it, kind of feels like something that an evil team leader would use. So if we're assuming that this elite trainer bird keeper guy, if he were the leader of still is the leader of the villain team in Kanto, this should kind of feels like the kind of team that a villain team boss would have. That's just kind of the vibe I get off of this. With Gyarados, Aerodactyl being very strong, and then Scyther, Golbat, and Dodrio just have that kind of fierce, scary vibe to them that I feel would work on a villain team. So yeah, I'm kind of headcanoning this as him is completely replacing Giovanni as this game's uh evil boss. Moving over to Jodo. Jodo's another game that just has a lot of really cool flying types to the point where it is an absolute shame that they decided to go with Faulkner for the first gym giving him that team of Pidgey and Pidgeotto when there are countless, not really count, there are so many other flying types you could have used even on the first gym. I'm not necessarily upset at the idea of him being a first gym leader. I'm upset at the team that they gave him, period. Because he's probably the one gym leader that has been the most theory crafted to be changed across the entire fandom. I have seen countless videos and just people discussing how they would fix Faulkner's team. So yeah, this is just another example of of doing that. If Jodo actually had a good flying gym leader that represented the type, here's what I would present to you. So first, I do think the eighth gym could work for the flying typing. I have Mantine, Gligar, Skarmory, Xatu, and Crobat. I like this team a lot because A, all of them have unique typings. I love this unique secondary typing. And two, I like just the diverse nature of the fact that Mantine has, decent special attack, but really good special bulk, whereas Skarmory is complete opposite, having a decent physical attack and really good physical bulk. And then Gligar is completely immune to flying's main weakness, electric, whereas Mantine and Skarmory aren't weak to ice, its other main weakness. And then I think Xatu, it's honestly been a gripe of mine that Will even has Xatu as an ace. I don't mind him having one, and he has two. One of the thing is ace. It's a fine Pokemon to have just on a team, but it's definitely not ace material. And then Crobat, it's good. It's honestly deceptively bulky, but it being very fast is its main claim to fame. And I think the thing that kind of separates this team from potentially being Elite Four material is yes, this team is a team of five and they're all very diverse, but just the power output of this team isn't quite there, I think, to really push it over the edge. Gligar is pretty good defensively, but doesn't really have much output. Even Crobat, like I said, you know, is bulkier than you expect and a lot and probably going to outspeed you, but it's not really going to do that much to you. It's probably going to poison, confuse, and use double team and just be generally annoying, potentially flinch you with air slash, but it won't be an insurmountable threat. But like I said before, because I did create an eighth gym, I'm also creating a fourth gym here with Noctowl, Jump Bluff, Skarmory. I could hear an argument for this be potentially being the fifth gym in Johto. Chuck only has the two Pokemon, and their average base stat total averages slightly higher than these. Um, but and these guys actually average slightly higher than Morty's um canon team based at total. So I can kind of go either way with it. I like it as the fourth gym. I think, especially considering that the fourth gym where it is right now is technically it's not optional, but you don't have to fight it right away. You can go east or west of Ekritik, and you can explore a little more, battle trainers either way, and gain a little more experience, then come back if this is a challenge. So yeah, I feel a little bad about not having Murkrow in either of these teams. I think Murkrow instead of either Jumpluff or Noctowl would definitely cement this as a fourth gym, but I really wanted to spotlight Jumpluff. The Skiploom is my brother's all-time favorite Pokemon, but I felt like Skiploom would be too weak for this point, so I wanted to have Jumpluff here, especially since I wanted to kind of challenge myself to create these teams with the mindset of I wanted as many non-bird Pokemon as possible on these teams. Obviously, there's going to be a ton of flying types that are bird Pokemon, but just to add some variety to the kinds of Pokemon that are on these teams, I wanted as many non-bird Pokemon as possible, so I wanted to spotlight Jumpluff as being a flying type that's not actually a bird Pokemon. All right, moving on to Hoenn, another region that had a flying gym leader, so I'm not going to use Altaria on this team, but I am going to use Swablu. I think this is good for the third gym. We have Swablu, Masquerain, and Tropius. Tropius feels like the kind of Pokemon that just feels like it would be an early gym ace material. It's just bulky enough where it's going to be pretty annoying to take out, kind of like Torkoal or even Magneton and Ruby and Sapphire. Masquerain, it doesn't have the highest base stats in Gen 3, but it does have the Intimidate ability. It's probably going to outspeed and potentially stun spore you. Um, yeah, I if you bring any rock types into this gym, Masquerain could potentially learn Bubble Beam, assuming it in Gen 3 if you stalled its evolution slightly from Surge Kit. So yeah, I think this team just kind of synergizes very well to be a solid third gym. Now for Sinnoh, this is a classic Sinnohism of having just a ton of really, really good Pokemon. So I basically had to make an eighth gym for this team. In fact, creating a Sinnoh flying specialist is part of the reason why I created this entire video series because there are so many good flying types. However, pretty much all of the good flying types are used by other trainers. It wouldn't really make sense to have a flying specialist in the base games of Sinnoh. But if we're assuming that this is in a vacuum where those trainers don't necessarily exist in the way that they do, now I have access to create a full team of good flying types for an eighth gym with Mantine, Yanmega, Gliscor, and Togekiss. And I like this team a lot for a couple of reasons. One, once again, we have them all have unique typings. And also, I like the idea that all of these are associated with Gen 2 Pokemon. Mantike evolves into Mantine, Yanmega, Gliscor, and Togekiss all evolve from Gen 2 Pokemon, but they're all the three of those are Gen 4 Pokemon. So now just something about that is very aesthetically pleasing to me. Plus, you still have the motif you have from Gen 2 where Mantine is very especially bulky, Gliscor is very defensively bulky. Yanmega is a non-bird flying type that is just a very powerful flying type. Then Togekiss is one of the best Pokemon in the entire dex. So yeah, I really like this team, especially for the eighth gym. You could maybe argue either switch out Mantine or you can add a Honchkrow onto this team to continue the motif of having it all be associated with Gen 4 Pokemon. But I think this is good enough for the eighth gym. But I did create another gym. I think it would also work as the fifth gym. Unfortunately, this one doesn't have every Pokemon having unique typings, but I think it still works. They all still do very different things. Chatot, Murkrow, Driftblim, Staraptor. Now typically the fifth gym in Sinnoh only has three Pokemon, but considering just how good each of those Pokemon are, I think you can take one of those away and basically split it into two kind of weaker Pokemon. Chatot and Murkrow, they're good at what they do, but they're not like overwhelmingly strong. So I think that's good enough for the fifth gym. Moving over to Unova, another region that just had a lot of really good flying types. I typically don't want to make this many eighth gyms, but for some reason, you know, the flying type just kind of deceptively has a lot of really good Pokemon. So I think you can make one that's the eighth gym with Emolga, Swoobat, Mandibuzz, and Braviary. Once again, they all have unique typings. Um, and I really like the idea of for the fifth gym throughout the series, I've been giving all of them for Unova specifically, I've been giving all of them their type boosting gym. So in this instance, it would be the flying gym. And I like this a lot here because using acrobatics with the flying gym is kind of like the most canon way that people even in game and even now to this day use the gym system because acrobatics is a 55 base power move that does 110 damage if you have no item, and the flying gym is used up the first time you use a flying move. So when you actually use acrobatics, it's an incredibly powerful flying move. So I like the idea of this Braviary who already has amazing physical attack, just unleashes a tactical nuke on the first Pokemon that you have. So I hope you have a rock or steel type that can, that can tank that hit, because otherwise you are gonna be down a Pokemon, from this Braviary. Even if you do have a rock or steel type, there's a chance that they're gonna at least take a ton of damage from this Braviary using this gym in you know, its most intended way. So I really like that. But I did also create one that's the third gym with a Rufflet, a Vullaby, and Sigilyph. Maybe the Sigilyph isn't going to, get as much use out of acrobatics as the Braviary would. Sigilyph's attack is significantly lower, but if it uses Air Cutter or even Air Slash with the type boosting gem, that's still going to be pretty devastating. Moving over to Kalos. Once again, I made one that's the eighth gym. Uh, Kalos just this is one of those instances where every good flying type was used by another major trainer. So in a vacuum, I think it just makes perfect sense for there to be a flying specialist in this generation. So I have one that is the eighth gem. And I also think that this would have been a perfect opportunity to actually have sky battles matter. It would maybe be a little gimmicky and maybe even a little annoying to, certain like challenge runs and Nuzlockers and whatever, to have a gym leader force you into a sky battle. But considering there's like three or four trainers throughout the entire region that have these optional sky battles, and these sky battles essentially forced a lot of different Pokemon to have models that forced them to fly, which messed up models like Zatu, um, caused Pokemon like Noivern and Charizard to just look better on the ground. It messed up Electros for generations. Um, it would just essentially make that a little more stomachable because, oh, it actually matters to the story for sky battles to exist. So the gym leader here, I decide, is actually a sky battle. Now, technically speaking, Halucha and Mega Pinsir are not technically sky battle compatible, but I'm gonna say in this instance they can be. So we have Talonflame, Halucha, Swanna, Mega Pinsir, and Noivern. If there's too much of an issue, if it literally can't be done to have Pinsir be able to fly, because that's the main reason why Mega Pinsir isn't fly battle capable, because Pinsir isn't, you can't be using a sky battle, and then therefore it can't mega evolve into a Pokemon that can fly. And then Halucha, because its model is on the ground, it can't sky battle, even though I feel you could have just had two models for a certain Pokemon. But whatever. The point is, I think this is a very good eighth gym team. And I'm very okay with this having five Pokemon, because by this point the trainer has access to Mega Evolutions. They have access to the legendary Pokemon. I I think this won't really be that big of an issue for the player to get through. But I also did create one that's the third gem. I think Halutra is a very good Pokemon for the third gem, but we also have a Noibat and a Fletchinder. Pretty standard, but I think if I'm not allowed to have one that is the eighth gem, I think this is a pretty solid third gem. Now we have Alola. Now, typically, Alola does not have gym leaders, but just kind of based on the vibes of other, you know, other regions and just kind of the progression of the game itself, I think the fourth gym for this type could work. We have Oricorio, Delibird, Tropius, and Minior. Any later in the game, I think this Minior could definitely get away with using Shell Smash, but this early, I think just the fact that Minior does, change its form and then get stronger in its shields down form, I think that would be I think that would be enough. But in a post game fight, oh yeah, this Minior is definitely using using Shell Smash. Um, I wasn't too concerned about which Oricorio I use. I just knew I didn't want to use the fire one since that was the one that is on Kahili's team. And I threw the electric one on here just so that it's not weak to electric. And then Delibird I have on here just because I felt a little bad about completely ignoring it on the Jodo team. And plus, and there's something fun about Delibird and Tropius being next to each other here, one being obviously found in very snowy climates, than one being very tropical. I don't know, I just find that kind of fun. Next up, we have Galar, and I went with the third gym, which is the first gym in Canon Galar that uses Gigantamax Pokemon. So we have Cramorant, Vespiquen, since I didn't use it anywhere on the either Sinnoh team, I wanted to spotlight it somewhere, and then Gigantamax Corviknight. The only other, as far as I could tell, the only other flying Gigantamax form I could have used were either Charizard, which I'm not doing that, and Gigantamax Butterfree. And since neither of those are Gen 8 Pokemon, I wanted to spotlight a Gen 8 Pokemon that could Gigantamax. So I went with Corviknight. And lastly, we have Paldea. Now in Paldea, typically I make three different teams, or at least you know to spotlight the three different ways that terrestrializing is used in the games. One where it's a Pokemon that is of their type that terrestrializes into their type to make their move stronger. One that is of their type that terrestrializes into a different type to be either defensively or offensively good into things that it usually struggles against. And then lastly, a Pokemon that is not of their type, that terrestrializes into their type to kind of fit the theme that, in a similar way, or where they had Sudowoodo terrestrialize into a grass Pokemon, or Carbonite will terrestrialize into a water type, since a lot of other crab Pokemon are actually, normally water types. So the first team, I think this works as the sixth gym. We have Scyther, Bombardier, Pelipper, and Kilowattrel. I originally had this as the fifth gym and had Squawkabilly instead of Scyther, but I think a lot of the junior trainers in the gym theoretically would be using Squawkabilly. So I wanted this team to be a little more unique. So I threw Scyther on there. And I really liked this team a lot because Pelipper, with its drizzle ability, will set up the rain, and maybe you can even have it holding the damp rock. So that way, when Kilowattrel gets in, it can fire off perfectly accurate thunders and Terra boosted hurricanes that could potentially just devastate the opponent. And maybe you can throw Weather Ball on there to kill any opposing rock types. Which, speaking of the team where it tears into a different type, this Kilowattrel tears into a water type. It still gets the stab boost from its electric thunders and flying hurricanes, but now it gets additional boosts to its weather balls, which typically would terrestrialize would switch into a water move. Now, the player can easily get around this by either setting up a different um, weather, or just taking too long against the Pelipper so the Kilowattrel can't really make use of the rain super well. So it won't be just absolutely devastating. And once the rain is gone, the Kilowattrel definitely won't be as useful. So that's part of the reason why I think the sixth gym is about as far as this can go. It's really devastating in the rain, but after the rain is gone, it's pretty easy to get around. Lastly, I'm really proud of this last team that I made. The team where it's a Pokemon not of the flying type that translates into the flying type. We have Wattrel, Squawkabilly, and a Bagon. I really like this a lot. The lore of Bagon is that it always dreams of flying, so giving it, you know, the ability to terrestrialize into a flying type, I just really like that a lot. Not to mention, eventually, when you do, fight it in a post game rematch, it will actually be a flying type with Salamence, and then its flying type moves are even stronger. So I dig this a lot. Ideally, it could be a Mega Salamence to make Airly even just make its flying type moves I guess normal that turn into flying moves even more strong. Just having this tactical nuke of a double edge, just be the 120 power move, increased by air rate, increased by the terrestrialization. That would have been awesome, but unfortunately, we just got to deal with regular Salamence, who is still very cool. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know all your thoughts about all these teams down below. Please let me know if you feel like I forgot anything, if there's any Pokemon that you think would work better as an ace at any point. Are there any Pokemon that just, like I said, you feel like I forgot about completely? Any Pokemon that either, just any thoughts you have about any of these teams down below. I intend on making these kinds of videos for every single type. I've already made, I think, 4 or 5 up to this point, and I want to keep making it for all 18 types. So please let me know all your thoughts, comments, criticisms. I want to hear all of it. I want to keep improving these videos. So yeah, I'd like to have a discussion down below. So with that, we will see you all next time.